All right, my name's Steve Stred. Huge thanks to Marni for having me on to do this. As far as I understand, it's the first kind of video interview question answer. So I'm going to do my best to do this, and hopefully it's coherent and sounds okay. If you don't know who I am, my name, like I said, is Steve. I am an author of horror, dark fiction, some sci-fi stuff. You can find all my stuff at stevestredauthor.com. And so I'm going to go through the questions and answer them as best I can. And then can't wait to see what comes out of this. All right. So the first question I have here is about my writing process and, my inspiration and all that stuff. So my writing process is kind of changed a little bit over the years. I'm for the most part, I'm more of a pantser. I don't do a lot of plotting, though I have started to become a bit more of a plotter as time goes on. I'm a huge fan of doing sprints and then going back and editing. And so it's one of those kind of processes where I kind of have in my head what I want to do, run through it real quick, get everything down, and then the next day I go back and kind of tweak it and work it and get it to where I want it to be. And then I repeat. And I don't really have a word count or a goal or anything in mind for every session. I'm just trying to get it done, trying to get done exactly what it is that I had in my head that I felt like I really needed to get down. Um, for the most part, I do most of my writing in about 45-minute sprints. And, inspiration for stuff comes from everything from something very simple that my son would say, something random that I would see or hear. And I just kind of go from there and the story comes to me and I get it either in my head or I write it down and there we have it. And as for there's a part in this question at the end that says, do you write with a market in mind? No, I don't. Honestly, everything that I write, I've written specifically as something that I would want to read. And that's the goal is, I want to tell a story that myself as a reader would want to read. And when I successfully do that, then I think I've hit a home run. All right. The second question I have is what inspired you to first begin writing? Have I always wanted to write? Um, yeah, I think from pretty much from as far back as I can remember, I've always kind of been somebody who liked to use my imagination to create things. And I think a lot of that comes down to where I grew up. If you follow me, if you haven't, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in British Columbia, Canada. And I kind of went about doing things on my own. I created my own sports leagues. I created my own worlds. Some of the first things I ever wrote down was um, these twin brothers, and I think I actually changed it to triplet brothers at one point, who all played on the same line in a hockey team, and they had to come together to win the elementary championship or whatever it was. But it's always been something where I've always just kind of been creative, and writing is the medium of which my creativity has come out. I'm not really good at like art, like painting, drawing, that stuff. And music. I'm musical. I don't really play an instrument, but I'm musical, and I love music and all that stuff. And I was in a band years ago, but writing is the one that has kind of always connected with me, and it's the way that I've efficiently or effectively found a way to kind of express what I need to express from that, and create what I want to create. Because at the end of the day, the creation is the goal. Whether it's painting a picture, writing a song, whatever. It's creation is the goal, and I love to create stuff and use my imagination. All right, the next question is kind of a loaded one. It says, "What are my thoughts on the opinion that horror has to be graphic to be labeled horror?" And I think that is pretty inaccurate. Horror is some kind of a overarching genre, and there's so many subgenres in it, from extreme horror to splatterpunk to the quiet horror movement, eco horror, psychological horror, the horror thriller, the sci-fi horror. Like there's literally a million subgenres, and some of the most effective books that you'll read, there's really nothing too graphic in it. It's something that creates the mood, creates an atmosphere, kind of gets you really kind of sucked into that world. One book that I think is I don't think it has any graphicness to it at all is Starve Acre from Andrew Hurley. And there's there's really nothing in there that I think is overly graphic. At the same time, you could go to the far ends and you look at the extreme horror world, and that is very, very graphic. So I don't think horror itself has to be something that has graphic components in it, but I think it's something that it's the component that sets itself apart from a lot of the other genres out there, because it's very, very rare in romance, or even like a romantic comedy type book where there's not really anything graphic happening in it. But in my opinion, no, I don't think horror has to be graphic to be labeled horror. There's a ton of really great, quiet, slow burn horror that has zero graphic moments in it, and it'll keep you up at night. All right, so the next question is, do I have a favorite length to work in? So do I prefer doing short stories, novellas, novels? Um, it's changed over the years. When I first started out, I thought I'd only write short stories. Stories. I loved writing short stories. Anything longer seemed weird. Then I graduated to novellas, and anything shorter than a novella and anything longer than that seemed just insane. And then novels kind of took over, and right now I'm really liking the novel world. The annoyance of the novel world is that as I age and as I change my writing process, I've really found that I've I've started to prefer the expedition, if you will, the expediency of short stories and novellas, because novels, you're always kind of working on it and you seem to want to fine tune and tweak things more and more, especially as the word count grows. Versus short stories, it's really quick in and out, beginning, middle, end. Same with novellas, but novels kind of grow and fester and feast on you. But yeah, I really do love working in the novel length, but I do really like the novella world too. So it's a hard one to pin down, but I'll go with novels. I think novels are my favorite length. All right, my next question here is how I write. So, am I a pen and paper person, computer, laptop, typewriter? I do all of my writing on a laptop, and I always have. I have a short story that I wrote out for my son that I need to transcribe over, and I wrote it in pen and paper. And I did that when I was working at a satellite clinic that was in a remote location at one time, and I didn't have the ability to really even use any technology there, so I did pen and paper, and I gotta tell you, I hated doing it. Hated doing it. I prefer the laptop. I don't. I can't imagine writing everything out longhand and then having to then transcribe that and then go from there. The way my brain works, I type it all down and then I can visually see it and I can go back and I can edit it and I can cut and paste if I need to move stuff around, and I think that's the easiest way for me to work, and I know it changes from person to person, but for me, laptop is the way to go. All right, next I got, do you work alone or in coffee shops? I work alone. I couldn't imagine really actually being somebody who writes in a coffee shop, because I get way too distracted, and I would just always be looking around anywhere else. I'd be like a crazy squirrel that's always kind of antsy and just I'm too ADHD in that part of it. I prefer to just sit, have headphones on, listen to some music, and just write. And often I find the best writing I do is when I get my phone, put it somewhere else, and it isn't beside me, so I can keep checking it. So I couldn't imagine writing in a coffee shop. Kudos to those of you who can do it. The next question I have here is about whether I keep a pad on my bedside stand. Do I rely on my memory? Do I use voice recordings? Email myself? Um, Sometimes I'll email myself. That's the most common one I do. A lot of times I even just have like the notepad or message or app on the phone, and I'll just type out a quick note to myself. But most of the time, if it's something important, I'll email it to myself. If it's something I think I can rely on, then I'll try to rely on it for my memory. That's not very often. Usually I'll forget. So yeah, for the most part, I'm emailing myself. All right, next I have, do I work in silence or to music? And I honestly, I always need to write to music. I don't know why. It's just the way my brain's wired. But I can write with no headphone on and nothing going on like that. But typically, if I'm writing, headphones on, music on, or if I'm writing here at home and nobody's around, I'll just have the speakers on. But yeah, for the most part, I do need to have some sort of music, and often the music aids as kind of that soundtrack to what I'm working on. The next one's a huge hot button one right now. What do you think of AI in writing or used for writing? It's not writing. It's plagiarizing somebody else. They've taken somebody else's work, they've popped into a machine, and then you're using somebody else's work to spit out something that's you had zero hand in writing other than coming up with a random idea. It's not writing. It's ridiculous, and it's just there's no need for it. I work in the healthcare world in the real life. There's a lot of uses for AI in that in terms of early screening, detection, that sort of thing. In the artistic world, the creation world, there's no need for it. It should just be done and over with. All right, the next one I got here is what are your favorite movies, documentaries, inspirations? In the movie world, I often like stuff where it's the folklore or the wood stuff, that sort of thing. Adam Neville's book that became the movie, The Ritual. I love that. Um, there's a movie from the late '80s called The Bear that's been a huge inspiration for me. I love wilderness settings. If you've read any of my stuff, you'll know that. And for me, it's kind of that stuff that kind of gets you thinking, like Signs and The X Files and Splice and stuff like that. Those type of movies that really kind of keep you on the edge of your seat and make you kind of guess, or try to guess what's coming next because you never really know. All right, then I have a question here. Do you ever write in a different discipline, say a play or poetry? Yes, I do write poetry. Actually, that's one of the things I started out as when I first began writing was doing a lot of poetry stuff because I also was writing lyrics in music and that sort of thing. So I love poetry. I'm not very intellectual about poetry. I don't have really any formal training other than some creative writing classes and English 11 and that sort of stuff. But I love poetry. I just put out a poetry book a couple months ago, and some of the poems were co-written with my 8-year-old son, and he did all the artwork within the book too. So it was a lot of fun to do that. I tried my hand at screenwriting, and I've been very ineffective at that. It's just a tough one. So for the most part, short stories, novellas, novels, and then yeah, I do love writing poetry. All right, second to last question I have here is favorite writers and or inspirations. So, I mean, one of my biggest inspirations is really the wilderness. I've said this numerous times in interviews and everything, but the second you go into the woods, you're no longer the top of the food chain. There is something immediately hunting you. You do not know they're there. You may never know it's there, but it's also a vast and frightening place where time moves differently, and within minutes you could be lost forever, and they may never find any trace of you. The mountains of the vast sprawling Rocky Mountains, the forest, the woods, all of that, terrifying place. And it's nothing you should ever take lightly. So that's always inspired me because I grew up in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and we had a lot of crazy creatures and animals that roamed around there. In terms of the writing world, obviously, if you follow any of my stuff, you know that I've been a huge fan of Andrew Piper's work. He really inspired me. His ability to write literary horror is second to none. He exploded my mind that he was Canadian and can do it, and really told me that as a Canadian I could do this. And just the way that he structures stories is just so methodical that it's amazing. And I'm honored that I became friends with him, and everybody should definitely read his books. Outside of that, I'll say another huge one for me is David Sodergren. I'm so glad that me and him connected, became friends. He has made sure been or became a significantly better writer than I ever would have ended up if I'd never met him. And then lastly, I'll say I'm a huge fan and hugely inspired by Adam Neville. His writing is just that bridge between kind of that old horror world and the new horror world. He's able to create some of the deepest, darkest, freakiest scenes ever while still kind of keeping everything grounded. So yeah, I would go with that. All right, and so I got one more question here, and a huge thanks for Marnie for having me into doing this. Hopefully, this all kind of works out and works well. The last question's about dealing with depression and mental health and that sort of thing. It's not something that I've ever really shied away from, and in my memoir that I wrote, The Color of Melancholy, I talked about kind of overcoming depression in my teenage years and being in a going to the hospital for it and trying to do that and it's one of those things where we we often can get bogged down by thinking we're alone, and the reality is we're not. There is always somebody else out there, and there's somebody else out there that is rooting for you, even if it doesn't seem like there isn't. There's somebody that's rooting for you, and if you are sitting there and you're watching this and you think, you know what, he's wrong, there isn't, then you can trust it that I am rooting for you, no matter what you're trying to do, trying to create, trying to overcome. There's a lot of sunshine in the world. Sometimes the darkness wants to overtake it, but trust me, you can find the sunshine in the darkest of clouds, and it's one of those ones where like I said, if you think you're alone, you're not. Reach out to somebody, and somebody will be there for you, whether you think they will be or not. I know it's tough for us. Sometimes we don't want to reach out for help or anything like that. But yeah, absolutely. Depression, it sucks, and it can feel like it's eating you alive. But there's always brightness to find, and we just need to find it. So yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.